Hey pals, I'm here today to talk about 14 2023 releases that I'm super excited about. I have one of these on pre-order and I have all bar two of the rest of the set on hold in my library, so I should be the first person to read them. So I should hopefully be talking about the vast majority of these books pretty soon, hopefully having read and enjoyed them. So the first book I'm going to talk about is actually my most anticipated release of 2023, and that is, and I hate saying this word, The Deluge by Stephen Markley. So Stephen Markley wrote Ohio, which was my absolute favourite read of 2022. Spoiler for my favourite reads of the year video, which will be coming shortly. Thought it was absolutely fantastic and just felt like one of the most ambitious works of fiction I'd ever read. And if I was to read this blurb without having read Ohio, I would just be like, nah, like this sounds like it's just gonna epically fail. But having read Ohio and seeing how amazing he is at covering this vast expanse of themes and different people and just bringing all this commentary together in such an astounding way, I am super excited for this book. It is nearly 900 pages, which for literary fiction is insane. I sometimes read books of that length, but they're nearly always fantasy. You are following this scientist who is studying undersea deposits of methane, and he gets a death threat. And then it says his fate will become bound to a stunning cast of characters: a broken drug addict, a star advertising strategist, a neurodivergent mathematician, a cunning eco-tourist, an actor turned religious zealot, and a brazen young activist named Kate Morris, who in the mountains of Wyoming begins a project that will alter the course of the decades to come. From the Gulf Coast to LA, the Midwest to Washington DC, their intertwined odysseys unfold against a stark backdrop of accelerating chaos as they summon courage, galvanise a nation, fall to their own fear, and find wild hope in the face of staggering odds. As their stories hurtle towards a spectacular climax, each faces a reckoning. What will they sacrifice to salvage humanity's last chance at a future? A singular achievement, The Deluge is a once-in-a-generation novel that meets the moment as few works of art ever have. I'm so excited to read this one. I am hoping to pick it up this month because I would just like to read it as soon as it gets here. But obviously it's massive, so there are a few other books I would like to read this month as well. But definitely we'll be talking about this book in the coming weeks. Very excited. And yeah, just can't wait. The next book on my anticipated releases is Liar, Dreamer, Thief by Maria Dong. This comes out on the 12th of January. And I heard Sabrina talk about this over on her anticipated releases video, which I'll link above. And I thought it sounded really interesting. Sabrina mentioned that there's something in the blurb that she thought was a bit of a spoiler, so she didn't give it away in her video. I did go and read the blurb, but I'm also not going to give it away because there's always a fear that it happens later on in the novel. But anyway, the premise without that possible spoiler still sounds really fascinating. And we're following this young woman who's become obsessed with this man who I think she works with. And it's just become like a coping mechanism for her to basically stalk him. And she starts to sort of lose her grip on reality. And then she gets a message from him telling her that he's aware that she's been stalking him for a period of time, and basically loads of shit kicks off from there. It sounds really fascinating, a really dark and twisted novel. And yeah, I'm excited to hear about this one. This is one of the ones my library doesn't have. I might ask them to purchase it, but if not, I will sort of keep an eye out, hear what the reviews sound like, and if they are positive or sound like my sort of thing, then I will definitely pick this one up. Then on the 2nd of February, we have Wayward by Amelia Hart. When I actually read the blurb, it sounds entirely like my sort of thing, and it makes me think of The Bass Rock by Evie Wyld, because this is also a book with 3 split narratives, and each of those narratives focuses on a woman in a different time period, which is what The Bass Rock did, and I absolutely loved it. So we're following Kate in 2019, who flees London, abandoning everything for Cumbria and Wayward Cottage, inherited from her great aunt. There, a secret lurks in the bones of the house, hidden ever since the witch hunts of the 17th century. Then we follow Violet in 1942, and then we follow Alpha in 1619, who's on trial for witchcraft. And yeah, you're sort of following these 3 women and how they are linked together over the centuries by the persecution of women to do with witchcraft. Sounds absolutely fascinating. Thematically, the sort of book I would absolutely love. So fingers crossed, although I can't actually cross my fingers very well without using my other hand. Anyway, fingers crossed it's good. Also on the 2nd of February, we have Brutes by Diz Tate. Now, am not a massive fan of the title of this book. It sounds quite brutish, but I had a look into the blurb and this sounds like entirely my sort of book, because I, as you may know if you've watched for any length of time, love coming of age stories, in particular when they're focused on girlhood. I also really like when that is looked at in more of a dark way, like the dark twisted things, that sort of cult feeling of being in a all-girl friendship group becomes when you're a teenager, the desire to please and how far you'll go to do those things. And this sounds like it's examining all those things. This is set in Falls Landing in Florida, which sounds like a super perfect setting for this book. You're following a gang of 13-year-old girls who obsessively orbit around the local preacher's daughter, Sammy, but suddenly she goes missing. And they're trying to find out like what possibly happened to her. It says, through a darkly beautiful and brutally compelling lens, Diz Tate captures the violence, horrors and manic joys of girlhood. Hopefully this one is fantastic. Then on the 9th of February we have Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. I've heard lots of people talk about this one, so I think this is going to be quite a popular new release, and I'm not surprised. It sounds really interesting. When I was about 13 I used to read so much horror. I read like all the point horror books. I was obsessed with them, and then I just sort of stopped reading horror and haven't read horror for like probably since I was about 13, 14, and so I keep thinking I would like to get back into it, but just a lot of horror doesn't sound that interesting to me. I also think a lot of horror tends to be written by men, and I don't tend to read a lot of books by men. And so yeah, this one sounds really interesting to me. I'm following this young Cree woman who wakes up one day with a severed bird head in her hand. When she blinks, the bird head has disappeared, and so she thinks maybe she was hallucinating. But then she starts to come across like swarms of crows in the city that seem to be following her and have this sort of menacing presence. So as these visions or hallucinations, she's not sure what, get worse, she decides to flee and head back to her family home in rural Alberta. And she thinks all these visions are connected to the fact that her sister previously went missing when they were at like this summer camp. And when she gets closer to home, closer to her family, these visions start to get worse, and she realises that she needs to sort of unpack what really happened to her sister and yeah, like figure everything out. It sounds really twisted, and like this could be a real page turner, so yeah, very excited to get to this one. Also on the 9th of February we have A Spell of Good Things by Ayobami Adebayo. She previously released Stay With Me quite a few years back now, which is a book I really enjoyed. So as soon as I heard she had a new novel coming out, I was like, yeah, put that on hold at the library without even knowing what it was about. But it does say that we follow a dazzling story of modern Nigeria and two families caught in the riptides of wealth, power, romantic obsession and political corruption. I think we follow a young boy and a young girl and like how their families start to become intertwined with another based on their actions. Yeah, so like I said, I'd read whatever she released because I really enjoyed her first novel. I'm very excited to see her have another one released. Then on the 16th we have the Shadow Casket by Chris Wooding. This is the second book in, I don't know, will this be a fantasy trilogy? I'm not quite sure. But I read the first book, The Ember Blade, last year in 2022. Really enjoyed it, really chunky, sort of high epic fantasy book with a big cast of characters, which sort of interestingly could have been read as a standalone in that there was a full story arc within that novel, which I'd be interested in seeing more fantasy series do, because it means that you can be like, right, I'm not going to carry on, I've read this complete story, and also I won't feel the need to reread the first one to remind myself of things for this second one, because it's like the start of a new arc, which was hinted at the end of the last book. This series is like super epic in that the things they are doing are to like save the world, but it's a really interesting group of characters who are very different to what you expect from people trying to save the world, and their intentions aren't always as honourable or as ethical as you think they would be. So I think even though it embodied lots of the fantasy tropes, which it really did, and I really enjoyed those fantasy tropes like found family, animal companion, all those sorts of things, it also subverted them. So I'm interested to see how he'll continue doing that in the next book. And then on the 23rd of February we have I Have Some Questions For You by Rebecca Mackay. I absolutely love this title, and there is a couple of key words in this blurb that immediately drew me in. And we're following this woman who is a successful film producer and also podcast producer, and she investigates like true crime and stuff. And she went to a boarding school in New Hampshire And in 1995, one of her classmates was murdered, although the circumstances surrounding her death were always like a bit vague, and people were super fascinated with them online, you know, of that type of crime that perhaps wasn't solved, or some people question whether it was solved correctly, and so there's this sort of cult online following. And then our protagonist, who went to the school, and this young girl who was murdered was her best friend, is invited back to the school to teach a 2-week course. And so she goes, and when she gets there, she realises that maybe there was more to the crime than met the eye, maybe there was more things that she knew that she'd like hidden, and yeah, like things start to unravel. So I absolutely love all-girl boarding school narratives. I also like true crime, particularly if it's done in a fictional way, because I find like real life true crime can be pretty like twisted in that we tend to be really fascinated by the like murderer rather than the victim. And so yeah, I'm hoping this is going to be a really interesting discussion about that, and yeah, fingers crossed. Also on the 23rd, we have Other Woman by Emma Flint. Emma Flint's first novel, Little Deaths, was longlisted for the Women's Prize, and I listened to it on audio and really enjoyed it. I thought the plot itself wasn't necessarily anything fantastic or that original, but I found it really atmospheric. I felt that it was a really good novel. It was historical, and I felt that it really felt rooted in its time and place, which is something I really enjoyed. And it had a really interesting commentary on women and the power of women, you know, in this historical time period. So this new one, Other Woman, is set 6 years after the Great War, and we follow these two different women who initially appear unconnected. One is orphaned and unmarried, and will likely remain that way because obviously there was way too many unmarried women compared to unmarried men after the war. And she gets this new job and starts to rent a room in the city, and she has this chance encounter that changes everything. And then the other woman we're following is a wife and a mother, and she's got this life that she's built up around her, this sort of facade she puts on for everybody, and that all changes when two police officers knock on her door to deliver her some news. So I have no idea where this is going to go, but I'm very excited to read it and to like see all the twists and turns. And the next, on the 2nd of March, we have Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin. This is a family drama, sounds really intriguing. This is set just after the last American troops leave Vietnam, and this family is trying to flee and get to Hong Kong as refugees, and they have to separate and get on 2 different boats. So 3 of the older siblings get on one boat, and the parent and the younger sibling get on another boat, and only the first boat arrives in Hong Kong. And then they then get sent on to what at the time was Thatcher's Britain, and have to resettle there, but never know what happened to their parents and their younger brother. And another part of this narrative is that there's this sort of like ghost-like narrator who is their younger brother, sort of watching over them. Yeah, so you follow their story, the decisions they have to make based on this awful situation they're in, and them trying to uncover what happened to their other family members. I think this one sounds really interesting, and I think we tend to get a lot more of these type of stories published in the US. I'm really happy to see that this author's been published with this story in the UK. I would love to hear more stories like this being published in the UK, and so hopefully this is a good sign. Also on the 2nd of March we have, and this is a massive release, Burnham Wood by Eleanor Catton. Now I haven't read The Luminaries by this author, which won the Booker Prize quite a few years back now. I've always been unsure if I will like it, so let me know if you read it and if you think I would like it or wouldn't like it. But I really like the sound of Burnham Wood, so I think either way this will be the first book from this author I read. This sounds a little bit like Stephen Markley's book, which is the first one I mentioned, in that it's very expansive, it's a bit of a psychological thriller. So this blurb is pretty complicated and detailed, so I'm going to try and simplify this. We're following this woman called Mira, who has run a guerrilla gardening group called Burnham Wood. And for years they have secretly planted crops on sort of unregulated areas, illegally planted these crops, but they haven't really managed much more than that. And then Mira finds out about this landslide that has cut off an area of land, and it means that there's this massive farm seemingly left abandoned, and so Mira decides to try and move her group there. But at the same time as she becomes interested, this billionaire also becomes interested because he wants to build an end of times bunker there. So he tells Mira, we can work together, we can both do these things, and it'll be fine. But it says, but can they trust him? And as their ideals and ideologies are tested, can they trust each other? A gripping psychological thriller from the Booker Prize winning author. This is Shakespearean in its wit, drama and immersion in character. Brilliantly constructed consideration of intentions, actions and consequences. It is an unflinching examination of the human impulse to ensure our own survival. I think that sounds really intriguing. Cannot wait to get to this one. Then on the 9th of March, we have Before You Suffocate Your Own Fool Self by Danielle Evans. This and another book are a little bit of an oddity on this list, because this book was actually published a while back in the US, actually published before her most recently published collection. But because of the success of her most recently published collection in the UK, they're now going back and publishing her previous short story collection. I heard about this one. I've had this one on my short story list of, you know, books to pick up for absolute years. And reading her collection, The Office of Historical Corrections, reminded me, oh, I still need to get to this one. I was going to pick up a copy from the US, and then I saw that this is being published in the UK, so I'm going to wait and get a nice matching edition. This collection of short stories is supposed to be absolutely amazing. I'm not going to go into the details because I think a lot of people will have heard of or read The Office of Historical Corrections, but I just wanted to mention this one here to let people know if they're UK based, they will be able to easily access more of her stories in March. And then on the 23rd of March, we have Last Summer on State Street by Toya Wolf. This sounds like such a me novel. I'll definitely be picking this up. This is set in State Street, Chicago in 1999 across one summer. We're following an unlikely trio of girls. Fifi is the daughter of a fiercely protected mother. Precious Brown is the daughter of a prominent church elder. And Stacy Buchanan is the daughter of a gangster disciple, Queen Pin. They have a simple friendship, but when Fifi invites Tonya into their fold, life as they know it will never be the same again. This is a profound coming-of-age story about the restorative power of community, the claiming of one's own past, and the defining friendships which form the heartbeat of our lives. So, I'm hoping this could be a slightly more positive young girl coming-of-age story compared to Brutes. We shall see. And then lastly, on the 30th of March, we have another book which is a republication of a backlist title, and that is Leaving Atlanta by Chiari Jones. I think this one's been out of print for a while. I've been trying to get hold of a decent used copy and been struggling, so I'm so happy to see this is being republished. This is the last Chiari Jones novel for me to read. I really enjoy her as an author and intend to go back and reread some of her books that I really, really loved. So Leaving Atlanta is set during one summer in Atlanta. I'm not quite sure when. I'm going to put the date here because this is a real thing that happened. Lots of African American children in Atlanta started to go missing. And we're following a group of 5th grade classmates during this summer when all those events were taking place, and following what it's like for them, how all the adults around them start to become really tense and really protective, and how that affects their sort of coming of age across this one summer. I love coming of age stories. I love novels about groups of young friends, and like I said, I've really enjoyed Chiari Jones' novels. I think she just has a beautiful way of writing that really captures all the senses, and just want to read everything she releases. So I'm super happy to see this one is being republished. So yeah, I think there's a really great selection of books there, and with lots of different really interesting themes. I'm super excited to read all these. I have the Stephen Markley and the 2 backlist titles on pre-order, and then nearly all of the others I have on hold at the library, I think bar 2, and those 2 are the American publications. So I will be waiting to hear what people say about those 2, if their reviews align with my tastes, and then if they do, I will of course be purchasing them. So yeah, I'm hoping to read and review all these books in the coming months, so do let me know if there's any in particular you'd like to hear me talk about. Of course, let me know if there's any books you've added to your list because of this video, or that you already had on your list. And also, if I have missed any titles that you think sound interesting, do let me know down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!